Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canada Missing Project, and this is the executive producer of the show, Huck L. Berry, and that is, of course, Huck TV. You see, Huck, I showed them to you. See that? I showed it. You should be happy. Yeah, you're a good girl. Oh, you're a good girl. Oh, yes, you're a good girl. Oh, yes. Yes, you're so pretty, so soft. So you stay here. You stay here. I'm going to do the show. You don't bark. Be a good girl. I'm going to do my best for you. You know that. You know that. All right. This is going to be another show about giants. Yes. But before I get into that, we always talk about missing people on this show. And you know that one of the cases close to my heart is Lily and Jack that are missing in Canada at Pictou County. This news article came out, headlines January 29th, 2026. Stepfather of missing children Lily and Jack Sullivan facing sexual assault and other charges. RCMP in Pictou County have charged the stepfather of Lily and Jack Sullivan with sexual assault involving an adult complainant. Daniel Robert Martel, 34 of Lansdowne, is also charged with assault and forcible confinement. The spokesman Allison Gerard said in an email that Martel was arrested Monday at 11:30 a.m. in Pictou County without incident. All the charges involve the same adult complainant, court documents show, and occurred in Lansdowne. All three alleged offenses happened between September 1st and March 30th. September 1st, 2024, March 30th, 2025. Martel was released on conditions and is scheduled to appear in Pictou Provincial Court on March 2nd for arraignment. Lily was 6 years old, Jack was 4 when they were reported missing from their Pictou County home May 2nd of last year. Yes, and I have covered that case many times. I am someone who puts very little credence on arrests. Arrests mean nothing. Trust me. I know about this. I was involved in law enforcement for 20 years. I've seen other people victimized like this. I know. Now, is it possible? Of course it's possible. But did they do it? They haven't been convicted of anything. Now, if this would have been any other person in that county, you would have never heard about this. But because Martel is a high-profile individual on 2 missing person cases, his kids, of course, he's going to get the headlines. Now, there were a lot of allegations made by his wife, girlfriend, that he lived with the kids, that there was abuse, threats, etc. The reality is, we don't know the truth. Nobody has been arrested. The kids haven't been found. The RCMP, who knows what they're doing? Do I believe there'll be a resolution? Unless someone confesses, I don't think they have the wherewithal to do it. And that's I followed everything they've done. I don't see it. So, anyhow, that's all I want to say about this case. Give you a little update on it. Giants. Georgia sand dunes yield startling proof of a prehistoric race of giants. This was August 20th, 1936. Headlines. The Salt Lake Tribune. Not a mediocre newspaper, folks. Some people said, oh yeah, it's always the small little no-place news agencies that carry these stories. Not true. This is a big-time paper. Big time. The archaeologists were mystified at the finding of skeletons of men who were 7 feet tall. Some people say, well, that's not a big deal. You can go to the NBA and you can see a whole bunch of people 7 feet tall. Yeah, true. Actually, not true. Not everybody in the NBA is 7 feet tall. In fact, a very small percentage are that tall. The truth is that back thousands of years ago, they were not that tall. Perhaps the discovery of the first dinosaur bones on the North American continent created no more sensation in scientific circles than the recent revelations of a prehistoric man lately developed off the coast of Georgia. Excavating in the sand dunes of the sun-sprayed Golden Isles, archaeologists have gouged out the strange record of an amazing prehistoric race of giants. With pickaxe and spade, these searchers into the past have burrowed their way beneath the surface of the palm-clad dunes of Georgia's semi-tropical coastal islands to delve into the mysteries of a previously unsuspected race of mankind. The question uppermost in their minds today is, what manner of men were these? The members of whose tribe all averaged between 6.5 and 7 feet tall. Preston Holden, an archaeologist, is directing the excavation, which has been sponsored by the Smithsonian Institute. Isn't that surprising? Slowly, painstakingly, Holder is endeavoring to piece together the slender threads that will lead him into the past. He has expressed the opinion that the Smithsonian enterprise will throw important light upon thus far unrecorded tribe and perhaps establish a new link in the history of mankind in North America. Now, if you think, oh, this isn't true, Smithsonian was involved in that, this is in a huge newspaper, folks. If it wasn't true, the Smithsonian would have went after him. They didn't. The Golden Isles extend in a chain from Savannah as far south as Fernandina. They are today inhabited mostly by wealthy Americans whose luxurious summer homes and camps dot the landscape. The Golden Isles are romantic in their extreme. Known for these islands in semi-modern times fairly reeks with pirate lore, tales of mystery and violence and hidden treasure. The warlike Spaniards and Franciscan friars passed these islands on native marsh tackies. That's what it says. Rat-like boats that were pulled and pushed along. But today, only one of all the islands still remains open to the public. It is called St. Simon's and Sea Island. And had it not been for the never-ceasing strides of modern civilization, it might well be that the new proof of American prehistoric giants might never have been found. For it was the groundbreaking of Georgia's new Glenn County Airport, which will be constructed on Sea Island, that revealed the first evidences of the find, which has since brought archaeologists fairly tumbling over one another. Workers on the proposed new airport hadn't seen off more than 2 or 3 charges of dynamite when they were amazed to find a number of shattered skulls and skeletons scattered. One of the nation's leading archaeologists, Dr. F.M. Setzler of the U.S. National Museum, was dispatched to the scene. Yeah, U.S. National Museum. Setzler was convinced that the earth beneath the sand dunes would bear importantly upon the history and habits of Southern Coast Aboriginals. This is a picture. This is the location off of Georgia's coast where they were at. Just one of many stories. And why am I doing this? Because there's a group of people out there that I know that are watching me that really don't believe this. When you understand the magnitude of what we're talking about, it's overwhelming. Front page story in the Salt Lake newspaper implicates the Smithsonian. Next one. August 21st, 1906, the Gazette. One Fournier reports mysterious creatures in wilds of Canada. Listen carefully to how this is worded. Canadian Associated Press, August 20th. A Montreal cable of Saturday stated that one Fournier, the steward of a steamer trading in Hudson Bay, reported the existence of a race of semi-human giants. Walter Maunder, the well-known astronomer, in a letter to the Daily Graphic says there can be no reasonable doubt as to the real nature of these mysterious beings. The wandering Indians in the vast solitudes of Labrador or northern Canada are peculiarly liable of attacks of madness or, as the Indians put it, possession of an evil spirit. Don't miss this. They seem to have strong cannibalistic tendencies. Dr. Maunder described at length how Fournier, on one occasion, tracked the mysterious creatures, but never succeeded in seeing them in the open, but heard their gibbering. Sounds like the Sierra Sounds, doesn't it? Therein lies the crossover between the giants and Bigfoot. Sasquatch, as they call it in Canada, but that wasn't what they were called in 1906. And I'm trying to bring you guys along. The Bulletin, August 2nd, 1907. Bones of people of small stature with remains of giant found in prehistoric graves with copper utensils. Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Skeletons are being found in a gravel pit from which the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad Company is obtaining ballast for its extension through western South Dakota from the Missouri River to the Black Hills. The gravel pit is situated on the eastern end of the extension, near the town of Oklahoma, and but a short distance from the Missouri River. In the neighborhood of 50 human skeletons have thus far been unearthed. Most of them were found at a depth of 4 to 8 feet beneath the surface of the ground, and all were buried in either a standing or sitting posture. That is not normal. The majority of the skeletons are those of people with small stature, much below the ordinary or average height of the present North American Indians. Catch that? Small. One skeleton, however, is that of a man who in life must have been fully 7 feet in height. In close proximity to the skeleton of this giant were found implements of copper and bone, these being found in each of the graves near that of the giant, while in another grave was discovered a copper idol about 8 inches in length. Remember, we've talked about copper being found in conjunction with the giants in all parts of North America. But copper is not found in this all parts area. So how are they getting them? Think about that real hard. Unless they had the ability to travel at great lengths. So this is Chattanooga Daily, August 6th, 1905. Remains of Indian giants are unearthed by a descendant. Skeletons of Nanticoke tribesmen slain in battle 2 centuries before the advent of white men, found on the banks of the Choptank River in Maryland. This is the photo. It was on the front page in 1906. Pretty interesting looking. In the dry sand dune that skirt the Choptank River in Maryland, the crumbling remains of an ancient tribe of giants has been found. Proof positive that Indians of great stature dwelt there many years ago, before the advent of white races in America, has been laid bare by the pick and shovel. The discovery is regarded by archaeologists as one of the most important that has been made in recent years. And of more than passing interest is the fact that the discoverer is a descendant of the giants whose bones had been found. The man is John W. Widgeon, curator of the Maryland Academy of Sciences. Of course, the Maryland Academy of Sciences worked very closely with the Smithsonian. In his veins were the blood of the Nanticoke Indians of Powhatan and Pocahontas, dark-skinned princess who is said to have been Captain John Smith's from the Executor War Club. Widgeon's great-great-grandmother was a full-blooded Nanticoke. The remains of the prehistoric giants were but recently excavated from the encasement of sand in which they rested for 500 years or more. Now, what I found interesting is that the variance of what they believe these giants were there. Some said a couple hundred years, some said 2,000 years. This one said 500. They are now in the Academy building, so they're said to be in the Maryland Academy of Sciences, Baltimore, and are being articulated by the discoverer. The excavators decided that the tribe whose remains found were a branch of the Abacos, who for several centuries dealt on the peninsula of the eastern shore of Maryland. They were there when the town of Cambridge was laid out in what was then a wilderness of forest. The presence of oyster shells on top of the bones seemed to prove that these remains found by the Smithsonian Survey were of comparatively recent date. It remained for Widgeon, a descendant of the Nanticokes, to discover the giant remains, and the fact that they were found beneath the very spot where the Smithsonian men delved in the interest of science made the personal pleasure derived from the discovery all that keener, for there was much jealousy among the archaeologists. The discovery was a chance one. Widgeon had gone to Sandy Hill a few weeks ago to collect specimens for an exhibition in the Academy. After obtaining a number of bones from near the surface and several good specimens of clay pottery, Widgeon's attention was called to a gully which had been made by recent rains. The bottom of this gully and ravine was about 15 feet deep, which was lined with bones. Some blackened stone were among them, but no oyster shells were there. Widgeon was aware that the Indians of 500 years ago did not know that oysters were edible, and that their dead, of course, were not buried beneath shells that was a custom of other tribes. He began to dig. A few feet down, a spade struck a skull. It was one of the largest he had ever seen. The occipital bones were much thicker than that of the average man. When the sand was scraped away, an arrow point of a white flint was found embedded in the skull. It silently told the story of death of an Indian brave. The arrow point was rudely made, and Widgeon knew that its shape and the stone was fashioned by a race which lived many hundred years ago. He dug deeper, and other bones were unearthed. Leg bones as long as those of an ox were dug up. Bones of the arm and spinal vertebrae of ribs, all were of the size which astonished Widgeon. Wow. So you can see how the Smithsonian is weaved in with Maryland Academy of Science and all these other institutions. And why is that? Because they're the ones at the time had the money to do these things. Many other institutions did not. And they were small, they weren't well funded. The chain of sand dunes in which they were found had long been a spot of interest with archaeologists. What was one of the greatest Indian camps of Maryland was located in these dunes. Dozens of museums contain relics dug from the site of the ancient camp. On the crest of the towering cliff, which overhangs the southern bank of the Choptank near the city of Cambridge, the dunes are located. The spot is known as Sandy Hill. It is one black spot of an otherwise peaceful landscape, and that part of the Maryland is far from rugged. The cliff has a sheer fall of 100 feet, and at its base is bathed by the waters whose name of Choptank is itself a relic of Indian nomenclature. The section of wind and rain and snow has gradually crumbled the face of the cliff. It has receded southward. A little boy playing on the beach at low tide came across the human bones. They had been washed down from the cliff near the top. Some archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington learned of the presence of these bones. A survey was sent to Sandy Hill, and for several weeks, a trained force of excavators under the direction of expert field collectors delved into the secrets of the sand dunes. They carried away 14 barrels of specimens, many of which are now on exhibit at the National Museum. There you go, folks. The Smithsonian has been hiding this for years. Why? I said earlier why. I won't go into it again. Chattanooga Daily Times, June 16th, 1930. Giant skeletons found in mound in West Virginia. Excavation of two mounds near Morganville, about 12 miles west of here, has revealed what Professor Ernest Sutton, head of the history department of Salem College, believes is valuable evidence of a race of giants who inhabited this section of West Virginia more than 1,000 years ago. Skeletons of 4 mound builders indicating that they were from 7 to 9 feet tall. Are you paying attention now? Have been uncovered. Sutton believes they were members of a race known to anthropologists as the Siouan Indians. Data on the discovery will be submitted to the Smithsonian again. In one mound was a lone skeleton believed by Sutton to be a tribal chief or ruler, while the larger mounds of 3 skeletons were found together. This is interesting. The tribal leader was found completely encased in a chamber carefully prepared from large, flat rocks sealed with clay. That would have been interesting to find, to say the least. Okay, my friends in Montana. Oh yeah, Montana. Here's one for you. April 12th, 1903. Dillon. Okay, hold your taters. Everybody out there watching Yellowstone ever? Dillon is essentially the closest town to where they film Yellowstone. Just want you to know. Dillon, Montana, April 11th, 1903. Who would have ever known this? While plowing a field near Dillon, this afternoon, George W. Finch, remember something. Back in 1903, everybody knew all the different farmers and everything. Everyone would know this name. Found the bones of a giant. Both of the feet were gone. Oh, I remember I made a movie where both feet were gone, having been apparently cut off before the body was buried. Now, why would they do that? Around the neck of the skeleton was a bead necklace of superior workmanship, and around the waist was a belt of similar material. In life, the man must have been in the neighborhood of 7 feet tall. Dillon, Montana, April 11th, 1903. Now, this next one. Marion, Indiana. On the map. This is Marion right here. Right here. I have always said that everything we talk about in northern, eastern U.S. is related to the Great Lakes. It's all related, folks. If I can encourage anybody to do one thing, study the history of the Great Lakes. Ships that have disappeared, planes that have disappeared, fighters that have disappeared. And then what have they found at the bottom? Oh, they found rock circles on the bottom of the Great Lakes. A lot of mystery about the Great Lakes. Chronicle Tribune, Sunday, June 23rd, 1968. Not that long ago. Burial mounds found scattered in Marion, Indiana. When Martin Boots and David Branson established the town of Marion on October 19th, 1825, They must have become accustomed to walking around a mound that originally stood at the northwest corner of the public square. But there's no historical record to indicate that either of the founders was curious enough to investigate this mound. There you go. The majority of the public has no idea the importance of these mounds scattered across the U.S. Had they done so, they would have discovered the fact that the ancient race once lived in the area many years before the coming of the Indians. So, see the consistency here. There was a race of people here before the Indians. This is consistent in all the articles. The mound near the courthouse square was 10 feet high, and it had a diameter of 60 feet, according to the historian who prepared the 1886 history of Grant County. The same historian, however, reported that when the aforementioned mound was excavated to obtain clay needed for the manufacture of bricks, it was discovered that there were layers of gravel, burnt clay, and charcoal beneath which were found skeletons, both male and female, whose length indicated they were a race of giants. This is an article, 1968. It was evident that the giant residents had lived in the area perhaps thousands of years before restless Europeans hold your taters there a second. Accidentally discovered the North and South American continents. The skeletal remains of the males were more than 6.5 feet in length, and the female was more than 6 feet. Later, several well-defined mounds were found near the residence of David Oberman, and 2 were found near the entrance of the old Quaker cemetery, now part of the IOOF cemetery. And bones, charcoal material, burnt clay, and small pieces of pottery were found. In some instances, the bones showed traces of fire. On the bluff east of town, another mound was excavated, but nothing of interest was revealed. 3 well-preserved mounds were found on the William Leverich farm, and still another found on a farm owned by William Camblin. And near the lake in Fairmont Township, which is supposed to be in the course of an ancient glacial river, numerous evidences of mounds were once visible. An unnamed early historian is quoted as follows: "A close inspection of the mounds of the county will lead to the conclusion that they were either sepulchral, sacrificial types of mounds, and if, as many authors believe, cremation was practiced in this early race of people, it's difficult to make a distinction between the 2 classes. Those mounds in which the cinders, charcoal, burnt clay, and calcined bones were found, as the mounds were near the entrance of the Quaker cemetery, were either the bones of a human who had been sacrificed, or they were the remains of a human who had been cremated after natural death. And it's not improbable that some of the supposed remains of the historic people were in fact the burial places of Indians." One historian called attention to the fact that the remains in those early earthworks embrace such a variety and are so diverse in size and structure, they were designed for many different purposes. The early writers classified these structures into 2 general classes. The enclosures were believed to be divided into 3 classifications: defensive, sacred, and miscellaneous. And they can be distinguished from mounds proper by reason of the fact that they were bounded by the embankments, walls, and fortifications. The 1886 historian wrote that the mounds proper to which class the earthworks of this county belong are divided into 4 classes, namely sepulchral, sacrificial, Templar. Did you hear that? An observatory. They vary from 80 feet in height to 6 feet in height. They average from 15 to 20. The mounds, the historian declared, invariably cover a skeleton, frequently more than one, which are found in the original surface of the soil. The body is nearly always found disposed at length, and not infrequently personal ornaments, weapons, and pottery were found with the skeleton. Sacrificial mounds, which also occur in the immediate vicinity of the enclosures, are said to possess many distinguishing features. The excavation into mounds of this class have revealed a structure of uniform layers of gravel, earth, and sand. So do you get, these mounds weren't just piles of dirt. They were a new layer, a separate layer. You realize how long that takes to do? Considering these were supposedly done maybe 1,000 or more years ago? Templar mounds, the historian declared, are variously formed, and they may be round, square, oval, or octangular. They're generally high, and they sometimes cover a large area. They usually are surrounded by embankments, and the summit is reached by spiral pathways. And surrounding these mounds, wooden temples are believed to have been erected, but all evidence of such structures unfortunately have disappeared, and thus all theories are only speculative. Some authorities have assumed that the mounds for observation probably were erected as signal stations or alarm posts. It is also assumed that fires were built upon these mounds, which, because of their considerable height, could be readily seen for miles around. Now, I've walked you guys through, I think we're up to 4 giant segments. Why is this important? A couple of segments ago, I talked to you about a Yosemite giant found in Yosemite, in an area where the Native Americans did not want to go. So what was the giant doing there? It was in a cave, and it had a baby. It was female. And it was very well preserved as a mummy. Now, I've given you another story from Canada. It talks about a language that was heard, gibberish, which has been used to describe the Sierra Sounds. Now, friends, I don't have a theory, but I do connect the dots pretty well. I want you to be able to understand that I've been looking at this for a number of years, and now I'm starting to lay it on you. Your job is to keep an open mind and understand that that word gibberish is very unusual. And to find that in an article at the beginning of the 1900s, and then talked about in a recording in the 21st century, darn, it's pretty coincidental. And considering the advanced technology they had at the time on the Sierra Sounds location, and they never saw these things, and just like the Canadians said, they tracked them and they never saw those things. I'm just saying, that's pretty coincidental, and the facts of those 2 incidents are almost identical. Now, the number 1 location in the world for missing people is Yosemite. The more you look at Yosemite, and the more you study Yosemite, is we study history for a reason. Remember what the Native Americans said about that valley. Now the white man goes in, ignores what's said, and over 150 years, there's a lot of missing people there. Is that just coincidental? Or does that fall back to what the Native Americans said about the valley? So, March 21st, 2026, we're going to have the premiere of Missing 411 National Parks, the movie. And it's going to be at the Dakota Convention Center. You can get your tickets at missing411.com. We're also going to stream it online if you don't live in that area and you don't want to come. And books and DVDs can also be found at missing411.com. Just go to the online store. Yes, that movie, National Parks, is going to shake a lot of souls, friends. And it's something that has been long in coming. Team worked very hard at it. We're going to have a trailer for you in the next few weeks. But I hope to see you at the event. I will be there along with many others. There's already hundreds that are going to be there. So it'll be a big event. And if somebody says, oh, hey, isn't that the same location where you did the Sasquatch movie premiere? It is. It's a great location. In fact, you can look out the window at the convention center, and you know what you look at? Mount Rainier, which is one of the topics in that new movie. Oh, yeah. So, kindness, keep that in the front of your mind all the time. It doesn't hurt to be kind. It costs us nothing. And there's a lot of people in our world right now that are having a tough time in life. And I hear from you all the time. And remember that the people on this site right here are some of the nicest people you will ever meet. Feel free to comment. If there's anyone that attacks anybody on that YouTube site, they're gone permanently. Anyone wants to make a derogatory statement about somebody, they're gone. So feel free to comment and you will not be attacked. So from Huck and me, thank you. Be safe. Paulides out.